man puns begin.
All right. Ready to go?
Record. Yeah, let me just press record.
Three, two, one. Also, can you hear the laundry going next to me?
I cannot.
Okay, that's good. Welcome to Why the Cast Man, a
Why
podcast.
the cast, man?
Why the Cast Man? Still
Why
surprising
the
me
cast?
every
Gotcha.
time. Keeping it fresh here on this Why the Last Man podcast. I'm Alex,
I'm Justin.
and we are going to be talking about episode 5, Mann Hunt, spelled with 2 N's. Because
Ooh,
we're talking about Allison Mann. It's a pun.
That's a
pun title.
consonant joke.
Yes, it sure is. Now, if you haven't watched the latest episode of Why the Last Man on FX on Hulu, go do that, because we're going to jump into spoilers. But broad overview on the 355 and Yorick side of things, they finally managed to track down Dr. Allison Mann, the rogue scientist, who hopefully is going to help them figure out why Yorick and Ampersand are still alive after a plague that has killed off pretty much everybody else with a Y chromosome. By the end of the episode, they have agreed to go with Allison Mann all the way to San Francisco by foot to get to a lab there where she does human cloning. And along the way, we find out a little bit more about what's going on with 355 and the Culper Ring, or at least what her goal in this whole mission is, as well as getting Yorick and Allison having a drunk bonding session, which is always fun.
Yeah.
And on the other side of things, we check back in with Jennifer Brown and what is going on in Washington. Specifically, did I get this wrong? This is not the vice president. It's a secretary who's coming back?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. So the actual president of the United States comes back into town, spars with Jennifer Brown. She's having some panic attacks here, but they've formed a coalition to hopefully shut down this new conservative heir to the presidency who has been missing the entire time since the plague happened. So we're just at the beginning of that particular storyline, but there's a lot of interesting thing, I think, to talk about there. And meanwhile, Hero and Sam are off the board this episode, where Jennifer was off the board last episode. So we're very much focused on these two storylines.
I'd like that switchback, though. I think it's nice to jump back and forth, let everything boil a little bit. Because I do think what they did here with the Diane Lane, Jennifer Brown stuff, is stuff happened while we were away from them. We were coming back and having to catch up, which I think is a nice way to do it.
We've talked about this before, but even though the show is being released weekly, it very much has a streaming series, all episodes dropping at once feel to it. And I think that points to that as well. Normally you wouldn't do that with a weekly broadcast show. You check in with every storyline every week for the most part. But here, my guess is they expect people... First of all, they probably expect the audience to grow over the course of the run of the series. But I think they also
All people
expect...
dream of that.
Hopefully, yeah.
Including me.
I think FX wants it to be an enormous hit, is probably what their goal is.
Let's check the press release. Because a lot of times the show will be like, we're just trying to tank this one, dogs. Don't watch it.
But I do think they expect, because it's on Hulu and it's not specifically being broadcast on FX, that people are going to check back in on this at the end. They're going to wait until there are 10 episodes there and then go, oh, binge it all at once. And that's very much what this pace for this episode feels like. That said, I personally, who have been very hesitant / negative on the show, I'm starting to feel a little bit of a turning point here.
Okay.
I am. I think,
This is why the cast, man.
Why the cast, man, yes. But I do think we're finally getting to those elements that I'd been missing. We've had them peppered in a little bit over the past couple of episodes, but the political intrigue stuff I do think is actually really interesting this episode, and it gets to some real friction there. The stuff with 355 and Yorick that we've been talking about that really started to spark up the last episode when we saw more of a repartee between them is really working here, and Allison, I think, adds something very needed to the mix.
Yes.
So I liked it. I like this episode, but you've been on board since the beginning.
I've been on board from the jump, and I agree with you, though. Having Dr. Mann be part of sort of our main traveling group, I think, is great. She brings some nice energy. She seems to, as opposed to 355, who is inherently lying constantly, Dr. Mann seems to be just dropping truths, which she believes all the time. And that's a nice sort of thing for Yorick to see on both sides. So he's stuck in the middle of being like, you're lying, you're telling the truth all the time. What do we actually do? Since he is the driver, no matter what, he's not a great decision maker, but because of who he is, the last man, he's always the one who is getting them in and out of trouble.
So something that we haven't really talked about with the original comic is, and I don't know if Brian K. Vaughan ever came out and said this, but it always felt like the initial concept was, oh man, wouldn't it be great to be the last man on Earth? That would be awesome. You could have whatever you want. Wouldn't that be so cool? And instead, it becomes the worst case scenario across the board for Yorick. And I do think that's at least partially what we're seeing here is a guy who is having a terrible time all the time, and everybody kind of hates him. And 355 is sort of understanding him, but certainly is like not taking any of his jokes. Allison doesn't really like him, but I think kind of starts to understand him, but she's dealing with her own trauma here. And this was such an essential part of the comic that, again, I feel like we're finally getting to here. This is finally rolling in a really significant way.
Well, I think we're seeing Yorick come to grips with the fact that like what he wants doesn't matter anymore. Like him going after Beth was like his driving, his reason for being for the first couple episodes, and now he's realizing, oh shit, I can't really do that. And I think he'll still try, but he now is starting to realize he has a larger purpose here and is being driven by 355 and now Dr. Mann a little bit, and has to react to that. And then on the other side, you got Dr. Mann sort of educating him, and I think she likes that she gets to be like, here's what I think, and he's like, I like hearing you talk. So that's a basis of a lot of relationships in my life, for sure. And then with 355, I think she actually doesn't really like him yet, but I think she's pretending to so that she can control him. She is all about saying anything and everything to anyone so that she can keep them on the board that she wants to play on.
I do want to get back to that point about 355 in a sec, because I think it's really important to her plot line in the episode. But just to talk about the Yorick thing a little bit, I think that what you were saying is very clear in the scene where, once again, 355 says, now Yorick, don't go anywhere, don't do anything. And he says, okay, and then immediately breaks into a door and goes inside.
Yeah,
but
a random door. Like, why was he like, let me try this door?
Yes.
It's and it happens to be a rebel's door.
Yeah, which is a very silly coincidence, but I think it does show him and teach him that there's bigger stuff going on here about him. There's also the very interesting moment, which would have never happened in the original comic book, where they think he is a trans man. So he starts to understand, oh, okay, I'm not even the only guy in this world. You know, there are other ways for me to operate, other ways for me to live and be here. But he also understands that people are rebelling against his mom, you know, which really draws a line there there are bigger things going on than just him, even though he is the most important man in the world.
I love the cut from the liar poster on President Brown to Diane Lane as President Brown in the scene I think you're talking about. That was cool, showing the implications. But I think you're right. Like, Yorick in this show can hide a little bit more easily, as we see in that scene. But I think this show is also going to be using, there's more like culture and there's more like communication here than there was in the comic. So I think he will become more famous over the course of the season, and everyone will eventually know that he's the guy who's the genetic man that everyone is after. Yeah. So I think he's able to hide a little bit longer, but in the end, I think he's going to be just as sought after as he was the minute it happened in the comic.
Now, this, I don't want to forget this. This is something that really stuck out to me in the drunken conversation between Allison and Yorick. Allison talks about her girlfriend. Her girlfriend, I'm assuming, was a trans woman, right? And that's why she died?
Yeah, and I think that sort of gets into this conversation that I thought was really interesting, even outside the show, just to hear Dr. Mann talk about it, about just all the diversity there is in genetically defined gender, which I think is something that we don't talk about a lot. We talk a lot about gender identity and how there's so much diversity there and you can sort of find your own. But here, to hear the sort of biological side of that as well is such a good point, and it's such a good like way to reinforce like, hey, our bodies are different and weird, and we don't know what's everyone's body is its own thing. So like, pay attention to how that is in naturally in the world.
Yeah, I think particularly since we're at the midpoint of season one, we both expressed reservation in the first episode about adding in a trans storyline, not because it wasn't important to talk about, but because it's a minefield to potentially navigate in terms of story structure. And I would say I think they're doing a good job by this point,
Yeah.
both with Sam's story, these notes with Allison exploring it in different ways. This note of we find out testosterone isn't just available from the president of the United States, but actually available other places through
Yeah.
Yorick. But in general, I think they are treating it very lightly and treating it with heaviness where it's necessary, and that's good. Again, I want to caution if there are any trans listeners in the audience for the podcast, and we're getting anything wrong or you feel differently, we definitely want to hear from you. Our email is comicbookclublive@gmail.com. This is two straight white men talking about this, but from my perspective, I think they're doing a good job. How are you feeling about it, Justin?
Well, and whether or not they're doing a good job for the outside world and viewers to watch, I do think they've been able to take something that wasn't in the original source material and weave it effectively into the story in a way that feels very natural, and it feels like it's only enhancing Yorick's story. So I do think they're doing a good job of avoiding those minds that we had talked about earlier and not getting too preachy or just not giving it enough due. Like, they're really just driving forward with the story in a way that is like sort of honoring everything that's happening in our modern world from my perspective.
Speaking of modern world, I do think it's interesting to go back and talk about that liar poster. There's that great moment where I think it's Allison 355 and Yorick are all talking about conspiracy theories. And they're like, well, she is lying. She's lying about Yorick to everybody, yeah. So they're correct. And it's interesting to look at the outside world, these rebels who are saying Jennifer Brown is lying to us. There's some conspiracy here. What's going on? There is actually a conspiracy. And then on the other side, you have the secretary coming back, who is the heir to being the president of the United States, who is like a straight up Sarah Palin, nut job, conspiracy theorist person. To draw that line there between people who are correct about conspiracy theories and people who are over the top about conspiracy theories, again, a potential minefield in terms of the discussion, but I do think they're very deftly navigating that.
Yeah, and I like the way they're covering it, because it's like all the conspiracy theorists are like, she knew something, and that is wrong. Like, she knows something now. She's concerned with going forward, and her conspiracy is trying to protect the future of the country / world. And they're all like, you knew, you caused this. And I just feel like that's such a true thing about conspiracy theories and theorists. Like, it's always like something weird happened back then. And I feel like if there's any truth to or things to worry about when it comes to the government or anything, it's like, pay attention to what's happening. Like,
yeah.
Why are you so worried about all this shit that was so long ago? Like, everyone, like the Kennedy assassination is like, I don't know. Well, aren't we done with it? Like, it's not like there's more things happening in relation to that.
For the most part, and maybe this is me being naive, but for the most part, my position on conspiracy theories is people are too dumb to pull them off.
Yes.
Just
100%.
Across the board. And like you're saying, there is this actual thing going on in the world of Y the Last Man, where there is a two men or two people with Y chromosomes that are still alive, a man and a monkey. And that is the thing that everybody probably should know and should be out there, but that's the actual conspiracy. But generally with conspiracy theories, people will look at like A and M and be like, oh shit, it's Z. And there's too many logical leaps there when you already have evidence of things that are wrong that you should be focusing on, like you're saying.
And talking about your the secretary Regina, who is sort of the heir apparent to the presidency, she's, you compared her to Sarah Palin, but she's actually way more effective when it comes to making choices and maybe governing and at least plotting. Like, it was stressful. Like, her arrival, I thought, was a cool, dramatic, tense scene. And actually, I feel like she is much more diabolical and ready to make moves than President Brown is.
Mm-hmm.
Her and Kimber having their meeting, they're immediately plotting. They're immediately like, how can we take this over? There's the line, this is a Rachel Maddow fever dream. Like, they're not pulling any political punches on this show. And I think this show takes our politics, heightens in it a way that is stressful to me as someone who watches politics and watches this show.
Well, this comes down to not to get too into it, but the everyday divide between liberals and conservatives, right? That
Yeah.
liberals have these big ideas and then say, well, we should all work together and figure them out. And conservatives will have their ideas and be like, great, we're going to do this. We're doing this. We're not listening to you. We're doing this. And liberals are like, okay, let's talk about it. And they're like, well, we already did it.
We did it.
like 15 minutes ago, so it's done. And
okay.
yeah, and I think that's exactly what's happening here with this Regina character, like you're saying, is Kimber had no power. She was just there. She lost everything. She's wandering around. She's trying to consolidate things, but she doesn't have the power to do it. So Jennifer Brown could kind of push her off, versus Regina does actually have the power if she wants to take it, which clearly she does, and is pushing back on it. There's that, I thought, great dig at the end of the scene where she basically turns Jennifer Brown into her secretary and is like, hey, can you get me some food or whatever she says there? And immediately puts her in a subordinate position with that one simple touch.
It's using power as opposed to discussing power. And I think it's an like you're saying, it's a great comment on how liberals and conservatives in our world move, and to use it here in such an effective way. Like, it's a comment on our culture without having to be explicitly about issues that are happening around us.
Oh, I did want to bring up something while we're talking about Kimber. This was a interview, and I forget where it was from, with Amber Tamblyn, where she talked about her inspiration for the character. And she said it was a mix of Meghan McCain, which we pretty obvious we called out.
She literally is like, you were on The View. And I was like, come on, too correct here, guys.
Meghan McCain and the Joker.
Wow.
Yeah.
I smell a Halloween costume.
I think so. I don't know how the Joker necessarily plays in there, but Meghan McCain, I definitely see.
I think she's going to do stand-up comedy for the next couple episodes.
Just you think so? Or she'll open some stairs?
She'll open it Seinfeld style with just like, so here's the thing with...
When you bring me out, can you introduce me as Kimber?
I like it.
Thanks. So we got the Washington stuff. I also thought another interesting part, just to kind of wrap up that section there, is finding out that Jennifer is entirely not in control of 355 either, because there was this suspicion that maybe she was in on it to take down these helicopter pilots, but no, it's pretty clear 355 went rogue, did what she thought she had to do, and even if she's saying she works for the president, she's kind of working for herself at this point.
Yeah, and those scenes where she had to sort of play dumb, where President Brown had to play dumb about the helicopters going down, and she's just like so upset. At the same time, she's like, it seems like a helicopter accident, not my thing. I thought were great. And just like, dovetailing off the liar, President Brown's a liar thing, like, she is lying here, but she's doing it from a good place, and a place where she's like, my son is died and I can't react at all here. I thought that was really cool. And also showed that she can't even do anything to help this situation or find out about it. She's too busy dealing with this political intrigue, and she can't even track down her son, who she has no idea if he's alive or dead. So I thought this was all really well done. And then we got to talk about her assistant, who is there, the only person that knows what's up with her. And this great scene with her and Kimber, and she thinks she's having a miscarriage, and she goes to a doctor, all kept super secret. There's a secret between the assistant and Kimber, giving Kimber a little bit more power against President Brown, and revealed that she's pregnant and doesn't know if it's a boy or a girl, which I thought was all just great little mini story in this, that like the miscarriage, the emotional beat of that into this very real plot thing of like, maybe this is a new child, new boy.
Well, and it turns out to be a girl, so we don't have to worry about the baby suddenly dying or anything like that. But what I got out of this storyline was some sympathy for Kimber, I think, because her reaction to this she may use this as a political leverage down the road, potentially. There's every possibility of that. But what I got from these scenes was honest. Oh, I love babies. I love children.
Yeah,
I want to
no doubt
protect.
she loves babies.
Yeah, I want to protect this mom. I want to protect this baby. I want this to go smoothly. And, whatever conservative politics you potentially want to go into there that I don't think they necessarily broach at this point and maybe later, I do think that felt like an honest reaction there. And I do wonder if that'll point to Kimber potentially even breaking with Regina at some point down the road.
Well, and it points to something I think we've talked about a fair amount, that like these characters are people. They're not just their political flag and good, bad. I think this is a good time to maybe talk about 355 in relation to this as well. But all these characters are capable of very good and very bad. And this episode, Kimber plotting against President Brown immediately without any thought to the implications of that, just because it's a person from her quote-unquote side arrives at the White House. On the other side, she's taking care of this person that just needs help. And I thought even beyond her sort of like her purse full of baby items, and that's clearly something she's struggling with, she did seem like she just cared about her in a difficult spot.
Yeah. So good stuff over there. Let's move back to the 355 part of the show and talk about what's going on with her, because we get to see another member of the Culper Ring. We find out, unless I got these details wrong, they have a boss that they both seemingly heavily dislike, who
or have a weird sort of a weird relationship with, almost
Yeah.
like a maternal relationship. This reminded me of stuff that happens in the Black Widow universe, both the movie and the comic book universe.
Yeah, and clearly is a woman. Otherwise, 355 is heading off to kill a dead body, which is not efficient.
Not efficient, but also very easy. That's a lot of times the assassination stuff work I want to get into is like, hey, go make sure this dead guy's dead.
Now, if you, I'm not familiar, you have a better biology background than I do. If you kill a dead body, it comes back to life, right?
That's right. I think we've talked about this in a lot of our zombie coverage. If a living human bites a dead body, the zombie becomes a human again.
Oh, wow.
If a dead body bites a human, the human becomes a dead body.
Right.
It's a transitive bite.
It's all transferred through teeth bones.
Yeah, exactly. Very effective. I don't know if you know this, but teeth very effective at transferring stuff. Like when you put food in your mouth, if you notice, you use your teeth and then the food changes.
Into humans.
Yeah, tiny humans. That's why my theory that we're all secretly cannibals.
Oh, man. This is great. This is great. Once we've gone from A to M to Z, and I think it all makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. The only 3 letters in the alphabet, in my alphabet.
So what do you think is going to happen here with 355 in this plot line, other than there was a very cool fight scene in the middle of the episode?
Well, that's what I was like, maybe that's it? I guess we're meant to learn more, and I think 355, this is Agent 525. A lot of distance between their numbers, yet they said they started at the same time. How does the Culper Ring number? Do you get to call your number? Sort of like if you're a professional athlete with a little bit of heat, you're like, I want to be 525. I want to be 355. They're like, the jersey only fits 2 numbers. See? I don't know.
Maybe they have
Where are their
large jerseys.
Yeah.
Very
oversized XFL style jerseys. But I don't know what the point of this was. This was a cool fight scene. It's great to see her in action. The whole thing points, though, to a larger thing that I was thinking about watching this episode. In the comic, 355 is, she's harsh and hard, but she's also like, you sort of are with her the whole time. She's like good. She's doing the right thing most of the time, even if she goes too far or is lying to everyone. In the show, she is a little bit more of a threat. She's a liar that you can't get in her head. President Brown is like, who is she? Whoa, I messed up. When it comes to giving Yorick to her. And she is seemingly guiding Yorick and Dr. Mann at the end of the episode to her own purpose, like with no regard for what is good for anyone. So in the show, she feels like she's almost like a warlord holding onto power and holding onto Yorick so that she can use that shit to get something she wants. What do you think? It's just I
don't know. She has that tracker at the end of the episode, which presumably is the thing that she is using to either find somebody else in the Culper Ring or probably find her boss, even though I think they had the conversation about she turned off her tracker. They can't find her. So potentially she's working her way up there. The question is that to kill the boss for whatever reason? Is it to find out what her mission in Washington was? Because we still don't know what that is. That's a dangling plot line that we haven't necessarily wrapped up in any particular way. I don't even know if there's a way of honestly speculating, because to your point, we're not in 355's head other than her dream sequence dance and song number from the last episode.
We need to get into her dance.
Maybe she wants to put on a show, and that's what she's trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Tonys having just occurred. I think everybody wants to put on a show. And hopefully
Broadway's back, baby.
Broadway's back.
Broadway's back. Hashtag Broadway's back.
I do think maybe the biggest piece of information from this whole sequence with 355 is that Agent 525 was also tasked with going to Washington right at the same time that the plague hit. So it makes me feel like the implication is that the Culper Ring knew that it was coming. Mm-hmm. And that may be what is driving, if you want to look at 355 as someone who is a hero and is trying to do the right thing, she smells a rat with the Culper Ring and is like, I need to track this down. I need to get higher up in the Culper Ring to find out if they knew and if they caused this or what the deal is. Because the fact that she was moved there to be by the president, seemingly if they knew that everyone was going to die and knew that someone in that room was going to become the leader of America after the plague, having 355 there is important.
Yeah, and it has to tie in some way, I think. If it turns out at the end of the day that there was some other conspiracy thing that they were taking down, probably there's a good chance at least 50% of the people involved are dead at this point. So having a thing where 355 tracks down her boss and then the boss says, yeah, this is what the conspiracy was, doesn't matter anymore, is a very bad result. So to the point that you're saying, it has to tie into the plague in some way. We just don't know how yet.
Yeah. But maybe we've only met 2 agents so far, and their boss, who's also a woman, they're all women. So there's maybe something there, maybe not.
Yeah, we'll see. Any other moments from the episode you wanted to call out before we start to wrap up here?
Agent Mann likes to drink out of a big cup. Appreciate that. Loves a strong Chardonnay. Big revelation that male genes start to degrade starting at 40. Obviously not a concern for us.
Not here. We're teens. We're cool teens.
Future us is in big trouble. That's it. I think the opening sequence was at Boston's Fenway Park, and I believe that's just how it looks. That was not
after
future
a game.
casting them. Yeah, exactly.
They just filmed that live. The only other actually thing that I wanted to mention was continuing on the clothes beat. There was a really nice note that Jennifer started getting dressed in nicer, cleaner clothes once Regina showed up. Everybody's been wearing comfortable clothes in the Situation Room, ostensibly because they don't even have time to do anything else, but also why get dressed up at this point? Why the dress? Why the dressed man?
Yeah.
But that she does want to get dressed up for Regina, I thought was an interesting, very subtle note that was well done. I like that.
Well, once you have sort of conflict, you need to start to have some wins. And if you look better than your opponent, like when I meet you to do this podcast, that's an instant win.
What? Whoa. Dude, I put on a shirt with 3 buttons.
That is beautiful. And honestly, I feel overdressed in this this turtleneck and cowboy hat that I thought was getting dressed up.
Well, I'll tell you, I have glasses on, so my eyes are much better dressed than your eyes at this point.
Yes, but you can't see anything more than 2 feet in front of you. So
who said that? Before we wrap up here, who's the man in this episode? Who's the man, Justin?
Every episode, I feel like they do a great job of balancing the characters super well. But in this episode, I want to give it up to our brand new character, Dr. Mann, is the man with an extra N. Great breath of fresh air when it comes to the Yorick 355 dynamic. I'm very psyched that she's going to be, I'm making an assumption here, going to be riding along on this journey as they head out west to San Francisco to get a little bit of that rice-a-roni on a trolley, which are no doubt still working.
That's going to turn out to be Allison Mann's real motivation. She's like, oh yeah, I got a lab in San Francisco, but she just wants that rice-a-roni. It's the San Francisco treat.
You can't get it anywhere else, famously.
Maybe
It's
they're
just
going to
rice.
go to
Real quick, I haven't had rice-a-roni. It's just rice and pepperoni, right?
yeah, 100%. They only serve it at the Ghirardelli Chocolate Factory, another thing that you can only get in San Francisco.
Oh, good. Quick Googling you just did there. Or are you just sort of a San Fran chocolate head?
I'm kind of a San Fran head.
Nice.
Yeah. Trolley.
Now that
Skills.
I say rice and pepperoni, I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah. They serve it at Alcatraz, right?
Wow, okay. Wow, real quick. What do you have, a Fodor's Almanac in front of you?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to give it up for Jennifer in this episode. I thought the emotional work that Diane Lane did was really good, like you were pointing out throughout the scenes. You know, you're going to get Diane Lane in the show. You're going to get some real good content is what I'm talking about.
She had a lot of time to work on this role since she's been in every iteration of this show over the years and years of its development.
She started as a cool teen, and now she's she's on the show. That's pretty cool. If you'd like to support our show, patreon.com/Comic Book Club. Also, we do a live show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. to Crowdcast and YouTube. Come hang out. We'd love to chat with you about Why the Last Man. iTunes, Android, Spotify, Stitcher, or the app of your choice to subscribe, listen, and follow the show at Comic Book Live on Twitter, comicbookclublive.com for this podcast and many more. Until next time, why the cast, man?
Why the cast, man?